opinion or something?
Yes, there's a draft notification. We've got comments on that. Now we'll look at those comments and what is your view?
So I think that's very nice. Ultimately, that has to be there.
There are some concerns. People are raising concerns about toxicity and forcing micronutrients down the throat of unsuspecting public without telling them.
वो question हमेशा रहता. That's there. I mean, for all fortification, once it becomes mandatory, many years ago, when not many, 4 or 5 years ago, when this was being decided, there was a parliamentary committee of MPs. You might, well, I don't know, maybe DPs are where nobody else was there. And actually, I had to make some advocacy kind of thing for vitamin D. And off the cuff, I said we should never make it mandatory. The moment you make it mandatory, you're opening it up to so much litigation, this, that, all kinds of things that there may be people who have genuine reasons, there may be others who just want to have fun. And ultimately, you may end up, so at least I said we should wait a few years to do that. That was 2014, 15. So, yeah, you should think over all.
We've waited a few years now, 6 years since then.
Yes. That's what I'm saying. Now it should probably be acceptable, but you never.
Right. So I'll request you to respond to a few questions. During the course of my address, I would like to pose a few questions, and I'll be grateful if you can respond to some of them when you speak.
Sure, whatever I can.
Of course you can. Who else can?
So one big concern at the time was that is the industry prepared to, fortify and take up this fortification? This was a big concern, and over these years, almost 44-45% of the market milk is now getting fortified. So the time, like as Dr. Mittal rightly said, that it needed some years to take that decision. So maybe now the time is coming.
That capacity constraint is not really a problem now, I suppose. Yeah. So we can move beyond that. We have the capability to do it, but whether we should be doing it or not is a question that has to be answered. So we'll have to take a call.
Deepti, madam, you're on mute. I see you're trying to say something.
Dr. Sumit Arora from NDRI, he has done also a lot of work on milk fortification. He's a principal scientist there. And as far as NDRI is also concerned, it also endorses that milk fortification is very good, easy to do, and it only has good impact, nothing bad ever. So I think, sir, we should make it mandatory for milk and oil. Wheat flour, rice, they're not easy to do because the industry is fragmented. But I think otherwise, like salt iodization पे तो सर अभी भी लोग बोलते हैं ना थायराइड के लिए, but किया ही है, फायदा ही हुआ है सबको.
बहुत फायदा हुआ. जिसने देखा है before and after villages of Eastern UP and the sub-Himalayan belt, he knows the difference in those patients. There are no patients of those diseases anymore.
Yes.
It's a huge impact because you go to village after village, and there were children who were retarded physically and mentally, and now there's nothing.
Exactly.
So, I think we should start.
Even 35 years ago, when I joined service, we used to see lots of people in villages with huge lumps here on their throat. That was a common sight 35 years ago. Now we don't see that anymore. So I think basically because of salt iodization.
I think all our panelists are here. Do we begin the webinar, madam?
Absolutely, yes. Please do. Absolutely.
Fantastic. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, a very good afternoon to all. A warm welcome to the national webinar on improving the nutrition quality of milk through fortification on this World Milk Day. World Milk Day was established by FAO to be observed on June 1st each year since 2001, and it is celebrated to recognize the importance of milk as a global food. This year marks the 20th anniversary, and today we are happy to be gathered here, although virtually, to deliberate on how this nutritious food can be further improved to impact life positively. To start the session, we are happy to have our country director with us, Mr. Tarun Vij. Mr. Vij leads the India Country Program of GAIN to drive impact at scale through partnerships with both the public and private sectors. Prior to joining GAIN, he has led public health and development organizations such as PATH, America India Foundation, and the TCI Foundation since 2005, after transitioning from a successful career in the private sector. So I request you to officially start the webinar and help in setting the context. Over to you.
Thank you. Thanks, Bhuvneshwari. A very warm welcome to all the panelists and attendees of the national webinar on improving quality of fortification on the World Milk Day. Today provides us a collective opportunity to deliberate upon key issues related to improving the nutrition quality of milk through fortification in India, which is especially relevant given the large-scale production and consumption of milk in the country, and also especially considering the impending mandatory fortification of milk with vitamins A and D as per the draft notification issued by FSSAI in December 2020. With the above in mind, it is important for us to revisit the benefits of consuming fortified milk on our health and immunity. As we rapidly scale up fortified milk production, what are the safety and quality aspects that must be kept in mind at all levels in the value chain? How will the trajectory of milk fortification pan out in the cooperative dairies and the private sector? What are the opportunities and challenges for producers, especially the smaller commercial entities and brands? And what about the consumers? What is their level of awareness? And what will be the strategies to universalize awareness of the benefits of consuming micronutrient fortified milk? Are there issues related to availability of quality assured premix for all players, especially SMEs? Coming to quality, how do we capacitate the next generation of entrepreneurs, food technologists, students, and researchers? What is the role of cross-sectoral partnerships here? Friends, earlier today, we were delighted to participate in the launch of NIFTEM's Center of Excellence for Milk Fortification, and we will learn more about this unique effort today and the plans moving forward. So without further ado, I once again thank all of you for your presence and look forward to the deliberations today. Many thanks.
Thank you, sir. We are delighted that the CEO of FSSAI, Shri Arun Singhal sir, could join us in today's deliberation. CEO sir has a vast experience as Additional Secretary in Ministry of Health and Family Welfare towards drugs and food regulation, medical education, implementation of the Pradhan Mantri Swasthya Suraksha Yojana. He has been closely associated with reforms in medical education for over the past 2 years. He's also been associated with the National Medical Commission Act from the drafting to the final stage with the processing of the National Commission for Allied and Healthcare Profession Bill. We are honored to have you with us, sir. The floor is yours for the opening remarks.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Tarun, for setting the context. Mr. Tarun Vij, Dr. Vasudevappa, Dr. Amrish Mittal, Dr. Sumit Arora, Deepti, Megha is not here perhaps, and Mr. Vivek Arora, of course, Inoshi, all the distinguished panelists in today's webinar. Very warm greetings on the occasion of World Milk Day to all of you. And it gives me great pleasure to be a part of this interaction today. As you all know, micronutrient deficiencies are a global concern, and they contribute significantly to the burden of mortality and morbidity. Iron and vitamin A deficiency rank among the 15 leading causes of global disease burden. Fortification is a complementary strategy to fight micronutrient deficiency, and it is a cost-effective tool. It does not require any behavioral change on the part of consumers, and minimal processing costs make it a very attractive and lucrative proposition to tackle the burden of micronutrient deficiency. Recognizing this, FSSAI in 2016 had released standards for fortification of 5 staple foods, including milk. And further to that, now regulations are in place to fortify milk variants also, like toned milk, low-fat milk, skim milk, etc., with vitamins A and D. We all know that milk is a highly nutritious food. It is an excellent source of calcium, protein, vitamins A and D. Fortifying milk with vitamin A and D compensates for the depletion of these vitamins during processing, and it provides added micronutrients to large populations that have significant deficiency of these vitamins. This interaction is coming at a very opportune time right now because, as you're all aware, the Food Safety Authority has come out with draft regulations to make fortification of milk and oils with vitamin A and D mandatory. We have received comments on these regulations. They have been considered by the scientific panel and scientific committee. And in the next meeting of the food authorities, taking place sometime towards the end of June, we will be deliberating upon making final recommendations to the government. So it's a very, as I said, very opportune moment to have this interaction today. We have eminent experts with us on the panel. During discussions and deliberations, you see, so far we have done quite well on voluntary fortification of milk, and about 193 lakh tons of milk, liters of milk is being fortified every day. This much milk is already available in the market. But now as we are moving towards universal fortification or mandatory fortification, there are some issues which have arisen, and I would be grateful if the panelists could address some of these issues when they speak. There are just 5 issues I would like to pose here. The first issue is whether the prevalence of vitamin A and D deficiency today in the country, in India, is high enough to warrant mandatory fortification. According to earlier studies by the World Bank, vitamin A deficiency was somewhere at 57% in the Indian population. Vitamin D deficiency was 70%. But now there's heartening news from very recent studies in urban children. It has come out that vitamin A deficiency is only prevalent to the extent of 15% now in urban children. But even in this segment, the risk of dietary inadequacy of vitamin A is 70%. So dietary inadequacy is still there, although the deficiency levels are only 15%. Of course, there's one segment of the population, but looking at the earlier studies which showed 57% deficiency, this is heartening news. But again, as I said, the risk of dietary inadequacy is still there to the extent of 70%, and there will be other studies, of course, which I would not be aware of. So I'll pose this question to the panelists, that is it a major public health problem today, vitamin A and vitamin D deficiency? Is a case made out for mandatory fortification or not? We have to take a call on this. So this is the first question I'm posing. The second issue which has been raised is that there are no studies available to measure the impact of vitamin A and D fortification in India. It has been around for a long time now, and as I said, huge quantities of milk are being fortified, and some programs like ICDS are using fortified staples, fortified oils also, but no major studies are available for impact assessment. So in the absence of such studies, do we have sufficient evidence to proceed with mandatory fortification? That is the second question. The third question is about the concept of EAR and RDA and the TUL. As we are all aware, in the ICMR and IN 2020 report, EAR has been introduced for the first time. Now, there's one interpretation which says that EAR is the nutrient requirement to evaluate nutrient intakes of a population. RDA is for healthy individuals, and when intake up to RDA levels is prescribed, it will ensure that the risk of lesser nutrient intake is minimal that is less than 3%. People would have less than the required intake. Now, this has been interpreted by some people to say that 97% people would have more than the required intake of micronutrients. So now one theory has been propounded that RDA should be the safe limit up to which we can go in fortification, and EAR is the actual figure we should be looking at. And in this scheme of things, perhaps QL becomes somewhat redundant. So the question of how to look at EAR, RDA, and TUL is the third question I'm posing. The fourth question is about vitamin A toxicity. This is another concern which has been raised. So are fears on this account justified? To give you some figures, the EAR recommended by ICMR varies from 170 microgram RAE to 720 microgram RAE for various settings, from infants to lactating mothers and nursing mothers. On the other hand, the RDA is recommended between 350 micrograms and 1000 micrograms. It is slightly higher than the EAR, so 350 to 1000 micrograms across various segments. The TUL it stands at 600 to 3000 micrograms. Now we are permitting at the moment fortification of milk with vitamin A to the extent of 270 to 450 micrograms RAE per liter. That is per liter of milk, 270 to 450. And the recent report by NIN about what India eats, that suggests that the consumption of milk in India per capita is less than 100 milliliters per day. It ranges from 66 milliliters to 99 milliliters. Only in the western region, in one area, it is 145 milliliters of milk. So we are looking at something like 100 milliliters of milk per person per day is the average consumption in India. And this we want to fortify with 270 to 450 micrograms per liter. So therefore, the additional intake of vitamin A would be at the most 45 micrograms. So when this 45 micrograms is being given as against the TUL of 600 to 3000 micrograms for various segments, does it actually pose a significant risk of toxicity? Is this fear justified or not? That is something I would like to have your reaction on. Another point has been raised that if therapeutic doses of vitamin A are being given to a child under the government schemes, then of course the milk or oil which adds on to that therapeutic dose would pose a danger of toxicity. Now that is another point which I don't really understand, because if you are giving a therapeutic dose, it has to be under the supervision of a doctor, and the doctor would see what is going on. Therefore, if the therapeutic dose needs to be discontinued at some point of time, if it instead of 2 months, if it is to be given for only 1.5 months, the doctor would know. So is toxicity a really major concern? It's a significant concern or not? That is the fourth question I'm raising. And the final question is an ethical one. We face two kinds of dilemmas here. One is that if we go for mandatory fortification, then people may not be aware that they are consuming fortified milk, and therefore we'll be giving them, unsuspecting population would be subjected to having fortified milk. So it's an ethical issue. That is one part of the story. The other part of the story is that vast majority of the population is not even aware that they are deficient in vitamin A and vitamin D. They are not aware which brands are fortified, which brands are not fortified. And therefore, in their ignorance, we allow them to suffer the consequences of vitamin A or vitamin D deficiency. So that is also an ethical dilemma. And a balance of public good has to be struck. We have to see whether the unsuspecting person who takes vitamin A or D unknowingly, he is one end of the spectrum. The other spectrum is people who don't even know that they are deficient. They could have improved because of having fortified milk or vitamin fortified oil. And we do not make fortification mandatory, perhaps the cost of fortified milk or oil would be slightly marginally higher. And therefore, these people in their ignorance may decide to go for unfortified milk, unfortified oil. So is that also an ethical issue? So these two ethical issues have to be balanced, and the balance of public good has to be struck. So these are 5 questions that I am raising. Let me repeat them again. The first point is that is the situation of deficiency serious enough to warrant mandatory fortification? The second is whether we have any significant impact assessment studies. Are we convinced it is a good idea? The third is the question of EAR versus RDA versus TUL. The fourth question is about toxicity and is it a serious concern? And the fifth question is about an ethical dilemma before us. And where does the balance of public good lie? These are some questions I wanted to pose. I am aware that we have lots of very eminent speakers and we have only 1 hour for this particular session. So I'll not take too much of your time. I look forward to listening to all of you. And at the end of the day, Inoshi, will you kindly reduce all this to writing whatever is discussed here so that it is one of the inputs we can furnish to the Food Authority when they discuss the whole issue. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you very much, sir. And thank you for posing those pertinent questions. And I'm certain the experts would be able to answer as much as possible in this session here. We now begin with the presentations from the experts in the field. And we are happy that Dr. Amrish Mittal could join us today to share his expertise on the impact of fortified milk, especially of vitamin D on health and immunity. Dr. Mittal is the chairman and the head of the Department of Endocrinology and Diabetes at the Max Healthcare Group of Hospitals. He's the recipient of some of the most prestigious accolades from across the globe, including the Padma Bhushan and the B.C. Roy Award in India and the IOF President's Award, to mention a few. He is a pioneer in the research on vitamin D and its linkages to non-communicable diseases. We are delighted to have you with us, Dr. Mittal. Over to you, sir. So I believe you're on mute.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are now.
Is the screen visible? My slides?
Yes, it is.
Well, thank you very much. It's indeed an honor to be here amongst such experts in the field. I really cannot claim to be an expert either in nutrition or in fortification or anything. But certainly, I am an endocrinologist with interest in...
Could we request everybody except the speaker to please keep your mute button?
Thank you. Thank you. So I am an endocrinologist who treats all kinds of endocrine disorders, but I have a particular interest in public health issues related to endocrinology. Started my career with the iodine story under my mentors, and over the years have worked on vitamin D, right from defining vitamin D deficiency, prescribing it, discussing strategies to overcome it, discussing public health impact, of low degrees of D deficiency, not severe D deficiency that we all know, and all those things. So it's indeed an honor for me to be here, and I'll talk very little about this just to give you a clinical perspective and quickly address whatever little I can, in my opinion, about Mr. Singh's very, very judicious and important questions. Now, the first thing is that we all know that vitamin D is critical for our bones and muscles. So there is no controversy or no discussion about that. We won't waste time on that. We know that for the calcium to get absorbed from the diet and reach our bones, we need vitamin D. If you don't have vitamin D, then it will not reach our bones. So you may have tons of calcium, but don't take vitamin D, your bones will still be weak. So that's a well-established role of vitamin D. But you know that vitamin D also has a role in other situations. If you look at vitamin D in infections, and there are lots of descriptions, but when you actually go through the data very carefully, very few stand the test of rigorous investigation. people have associated vitamin D deficiency with everything. I think short of divorce, every other disease has been blamed on vitamin D deficiency. But I don't know how good the science in that is. There are more associations. But other than bone and muscle, I think the vitamin D deficiency has been, in the present context, again highlighted as a very important sort of playing a very important role in our respiratory resistance and our propensity to infections of the respiratory tract by viruses. And there, of course, given all this, the pandemic we are living in, there has been a lot of focus on vitamin D, and vitamin D is important for immunity. I'm not going into the mechanisms here, but there seems to be an association between D deficiency and the risk of community-acquired pneumonia. And I think several meta-analyses have shown this kind of thing. So there seems to be some impact if you have two populations, one is seriously D deficient and the other one is sufficient, then the risk of acquiring pneumonia may be higher in the D deficient population. So that is one, but not just that. This is again an association. We have to show this, does it make a difference if you give vitamin D? So yes, there is data to suggest. Again, this 25 trials were analyzed in this, and this paper is one of the most cited. Overall, when we gave vitamin D, trials that used vitamin D, firstly, they found no toxicity, and secondly, they did reduce the risk of respiratory tract infections overall. So just to give you a perspective of where vitamin D stands today. Now, what's the story of India? And this should answer the first question, perhaps, that Mr. Singhal was talking about, especially with regard to D, is that 2009, we did this sort of analysis of all the data available from all over the world on vitamin D. That's not 11 years ago, but that's when we did it. And that helped focus attention on vitamin D as a major issue across the world. And if you look at the vitamin D status in adults, we've not included children here, you will see that a lot of these areas which are red are actually significantly deficient, orange and red areas. And the blue ones, there is no data actually, so you can't really compare them. But there is, and the only green ones, really green ones, are here, where they have a lot of vitamin D containing fish in Scandinavia, or in countries where vitamin D fortification is practiced as a routine. There you get less amounts of D deficiency. Otherwise, you get D deficiency commonly in countries like India. And when we first started describing this, there was always this question, it's all bunkum. How can it be India has so much sun? If the main source of vitamin D is the sun, then why is there deficiency? Well, it depends. In one line, I would say that in the cities, for example, firstly, it's the latitude, season, time of the day. During winter, our UV rays are less. The latitude, of course, matters. We go up north, Kashmir versus Kanyakumari, more D deficiency in the north. Closer to equator, less D deficiency. Time of the day, and we've been traditionally told that early morning is the best way to do your sun prayers and Surya Namaskar and everything. But actually, this vitamin D in the sun comes around noon. So and noon exposure, let's be real, for most, at least so-called white-collared workers, is almost impossible. On a working day, you can't go out in the sun from 12 to 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock. That's not going to happen. So there is an issue. And on top of that, there are numerous studies that show that not only when there's cloud cover, as in the Northeast, where the D levels are really low in the Northeast, but also when there is a lot of atmospheric pollution, like we have in Delhi, the synthesis of D is reduced significantly. So that's a very, very important point, that why has D deficiency increased in the cities? Perhaps this could be one important reason. We have all moved indoors. We are not outdoors as we used to be when we were children. We've all moved inside. Plus, even when we did studies on children exposed to sunshine in Delhi, they didn't make much vitamin D, especially in winter, because the atmospheric pollution scatters the UV rays and doesn't allow them to reach your skin. And of course, we spend less time outdoors. And obviously, in the more modern sections of society, sunscreen use has become popular. So that also blocks vitamin D. So all those things are important areas why we are deficient. I think I've already said that. The only groups where people have found good vitamin D levels, if we use the word good, adequate D levels or close to optimum D levels, are manual construction workers, rickshaw pullers, etc. in Delhi. There's published data on this now that they have good vitamin D levels, very effective. But the rest of the world, rest of the urban dwelling Indians don't have it. Even rural India, there is significant deficiency, especially amongst young girls who may be well covered, or even women who work in the sun sometimes are very well covered. So they may not. It varies from different parts of the country, but you may not be getting enough exposure to the sun. So there is an issue, and as I already pointed out, pollution is a reason why in places like Delhi, the usual half an hour exposure or something will not get you enough vitamin D. You have to be in the sun all day probably, because the pollution doesn't allow adequate UV rays to reach your skin, and skin is the main source of vitamin D. Well, there are lots of data. Now, A and D deficiencies go together. I'm not talking of A deficiency today. You all are experts, but the fact is that A deficiency seems to have improved in India to some extent. We are not finding the same for D, and I'll tell you why. When we looked at vitamin D last year, just in October last year, September, in the middle of the pandemic, in 400 consecutive patients who were hospitalized for COVID in the hospital, we measured the D levels. I'm not showing the data too technical, but nevertheless, 1/4 of them had vitamin D levels below 10 nanograms. 10 nanograms. So, which is really low. And at least 60, 70%, 65, some figure, were below 20 nanograms, which is considered acceptable. So the bulk of our patients were below 20 nanogram. I can share that paper. It got published in Nature Scientific Reports. But the idea was to tell you that there is still very much deficiencies very widely prevalent even a few months ago in India, and not even during winter months. This was somewhere after summer and after monsoon. So there is an issue there which you cannot just dismiss and say ki wo kuch nahi hai and nothing like that. And this small study, which I think still is a very important study that my former colleagues Khadgawat and all did, where they did add vitamin D to milk and clearly showed that you can raise the level in school children by adding vitamin D to milk. This is a very important proof of concept. So larger studies are required, I know, as you were saying about impact. But the truth is that you know that suboptimal vitamin D is associated with many conditions. You know that by adding vitamin D to milk or oil, or milk especially, you can increase the D level significantly. Now, we don't have data, I think, at the moment to show that adding that vitamin D ultimately results in hard endpoints, which means less fractures or less infections and all those. We don't have that data in India yet. But that is not so easy. It can be done, of course, but it's not so easy. But the truth is that you can clearly show, yes, we want to improve. Supposing our hemoglobin was 10. When we were medical students, we were told India mein to 10 hota hai, nothing. 10, 11 is normal for women especially. Don't worry. Now we know it does matter, right? We want our women to have hemoglobins of 14, 15. Right? So similarly, when you say that, well, how does it matter? We know that it does matter in body physiology. So it's logical that it will help in reducing the hard endpoints also. The impact. How do you judge the impact of vitamin D deficiency in growing children, for example? You will need a study that shows how their growth alters with vitamin D. If we are calcium and D deficient, how will we win Olympic medals? Because your bones just will not build during the adolescent stage. So, we can't, those are long latency conditions which do require studies, but not so easy to do and show that, yes, clearly. But from other countries, people have shown this. So we should believe that. There's no reason not to. Of course, we know about fortification of edible oil and milk. I'll miss this, and I'll not teach you about types of fortification. You know very well mass fortification, target fortification, or market-driven. Market-driven is when people ask for it, and there's a market. You fortify. Target is for selected groups who need it. Maybe like for infant formula, if you add something. So where you're fortifying things for particular groups of population, and mass is when everyone gets something, like iodized salt is the best example. You can do many things. You can fortify milk, dairy products, bread. The world is doing everything for fortification. So I don't know why we are struggling with lower D levels than them. We are still struggling to agree to fortify things. I mean, the struggle is much less now. We've come a long way, but still there seems to be a struggle. People have used even breads in Australia, mushrooms, anything. And, if you look at the studies in Beijing, for example, a good example to use, fortification studies, calcium fortified milk, see the D levels where they went once you added vitamin D. Is this clear? This is the placebo. The yellow is the group where vitamin D was added. So you were clearly able to improve. These are larger studies and the small study that was done by our colleagues. And the proof of concept is there. There's no, don't have to reinvent the wheel. Of course, you have to look at all these. Safety limit, technological cost. Cost is, I suspect, not a big issue. Technology is well in place. The safety window for vitamin D is very wide. So if you're really at 10 nanograms level right now, and if the fortification will hardly make it 13, 12, 13, the amount that will reach, and the optimum level, let's say, is 20, and the range is 20 to 40. So you have a huge margin. Unless someone is just, living off milk and living off oil, it will be very, very difficult to ever reach toxicity levels. Very, very difficult. You can't, you see, in vitamin D, what was taught to us and what we teach to our students is, अगर गलती से ज़्यादा भी दे दिया तो कुछ नहीं होगा, थोड़ी देर रुक जाओ, 1-2 डोज से कुछ नहीं होता. Because the body handles it effectively. Vitamin D toxicity only happens when we really want to produce vitamin D toxicity. When we are giving really horrendous doses, more than 10 times that is recommended. And we have done that. We have seen reported cases by mistake, they took 100 times more the dose of an injection or a tablet or something, and then they landed up in trouble. Even if you take double the dose of what is recommended, nothing's going to happen. Nothing. The safety limit for daily intake is 4,000 IU per day. 4,000 IU per day. We are talking of 400, 600, 800. So I think we can be, unless someone makes a mistake in adding vitamin D, we can be quite reassured about that part. This is just an example from New Zealand, what kind of things they are doing. We don't have time to go too much into that. So we need, as this is my general concluding slide, awareness regarding sunlight exposure. Never forget that. Supplementation for vulnerable groups. That's what we do right now. We supplement in elderly always. We supplement in growing children if we feel they're not playing out enough. Sometimes we supplement low doses in pregnancy, because that's very important. Those are vulnerable groups. And of course, fortification, I definitely think it's an idea whose time has come, and you all are confirming that to me. And all the armies of the world cannot stop an idea that has come. So I think we should not run away from it. We should iron out all possible issues as you're trying to do so carefully. We should look at all public issues, ethical issues, but I think in terms of medical data or medical requirement, I don't think there can be two ways about this. In fact, the FSSAI program has been greatly appreciated by the US Endocrine Society, by the International Osteoporosis Foundation. And I can show you the citation they gave for me for some award, where they have mentioned that, advocacy regarding vitamin D fortification in the country, because they've seen the data of vitamin D deficiency here. So I think those are important. I don't think toxicity is an issue. I think prevalence as far as D is concerned is very widespread. There are studies which show that you can normalize D levels or improve D levels, improve D levels with fortification. It works. We don't have studies to show that giving vitamin D to a population, which should be a good study to do if someone can sponsor before the third wave comes, to one population to give vitamin D, large population, and one population you don't, and see the difference in prevalence. It's not so hard to do at this point, because you can get a shorter term endpoint. The fractures and all is a very complicated endpoint, So I think, I don't think there is a big ethical issue, but of course, the fact that people will not be aware of what they're taking, I suppose, can be. Now, the other thing, and this is a crude practical thing I'm saying, People will always get up and ask me, but what about most of India does not use packaged milk, right? And the truth is that most of India, which is very dear to us, actually has the least D deficiency. D deficiency is there in cities and villages, but much more in cities. And in cities, it is much more in those who stay indoors. And those are the ones who use packaged milk. So I don't see how we can really go wrong in that population. I told you, out of 401 patients, consecutive patients we studied, 1/4 were still below 10 nanograms. So I think I'll end here, sir. And unfortunately, I'll have to leave soon, but I'll be very happy for any quick discussion, if that is allowed, based on the plan for the day.
If there are any questions for Dr. Mittal, we could have it now from the panelists. Okay.
Dr. Mittal, would you like to comment upon the RDA interpretation of RDA? Is it the safe limit for people, or is it the actual quantity we should be aiming for?
No, I mean, I think the RDA actually means what we should aim for. But RDAs are known to be absolutely safe. They cannot be unsafe. The EAR is only something that achieves in 50% of the population. So that's a good starting point. The RDA is roughly 2 standard deviations in general above the EAR. So it's okay. You cannot go wrong. I mean, we always are fighting as clinicians that the RDA is too low. RDA for D is just too low. We keep fighting with ICMR for calcium also. We think it's too low. But I understand the public health perspective and the danger of, being over enthusiastic. But at the same time, we think that with these kind of RDAs that we have, we cannot go wrong if we achieve RDA even through fortification.
Thank you for that.
I'm so sorry, but I'm stuck in the hospital. It's middle of the day. I would love to hear everybody, but I'm sure this is being recorded and I'll be happy to hear it later. If I can be excused, I'll be very grateful.
Certainly. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us, Dr. Mittal. And thank you for that compelling and informative presentation. We'll move on to our next speaker. We have with us Dr. Sumit Arora. Dr. Arora is a principal scientist at the Dairy Chemistry Division of the National Dairy Research Institute, NDRI, at Karnal, and has over 23 years of experience as a dairy chemist. Dr. Arora has developed technology for fortification of milk with micronutrients and also worked on safety and stability of artificial sweeteners in dairy products, along with several patents and publications to his credit. He is a member of 2 scientific panels constituted by the FSSAI and committees of Department of Biotechnology and several other professional bodies. Today, we will hear from Dr. Arora on the quality and safety aspects of fortification of milk with micronutrients. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. Yeah, I'll be talking on micronutrients, fortification and milk, quality and safety, a topic which is very close to me, and I've been working for many years on this aspects. Now, coming to the basics, why we really go in for fortification? That's one of the reasons should answer the first important questions Mr. Singhal had wanted to address this. First is, why are we going for fortification? See, when you go for thermal treatments during the processing of milk, whether it is pasteurization around 70 degrees C, or we go for Tetra Pak, UST, it's about 140 degrees C, or for spray drying conditions, which is more harsh conditions. So at that point, pasteurization, we have a loss of 20% about for vitamin A and D. For Tetra Pak processing, we are about 30% loss of this vitamin A and D. Whereas for spray dried milk, we are losing about 40% of the total amount of vitamin D or A, which is present in these dairy products. So how to address this loss? That is why we give recommended overages. That means we have to add these biological nutrients from our side to at least match whatever is lost. But coming to the minerals, say for example, the calcium and iron, there's only about 5% loss. So mainly we regard them just as experimental errors. There's no loss for these vitamins, but the same cannot be said about these vitamins. If you see the Indian regulatory scenario, which is being shown, For milk, it is only 2 vitamins, A and D, which has been allowed. For cooking oil, yes, both for vitamin A and D. But for atta, maida, and rice, milk, we are only playing with 900 to 1500 international unit for A, and for D, about 200 to 300 international units. I'll just give you the safety aspects. For example, about 2 years back, was a very popular milk brand which was being sold in North India. So this was a hot selling item. And if you see its tagline, how it sold the milk, it said nutrified with calcium and vitamin A and D. So please remember, he's saying calcium, vitamin A, and vitamin D. So we analyzed its sample. Yes, he was adding vitamin A and D at the quantities which he declared. Calcium he was adding at 160 mg. Now cow milk contains about 120 mg and buffalo around 180. So what this person was doing, he was taking predominantly buffalo milk and packing it. So he was not adding calcium in real sense. Luckily, we were under the committee. I was in this fortification committee and we discussed this. Before that, I was in a working group for fortification. And we started asking questions, how is this possible? So about a month or so, we got new packs for this milk. Now just see, nutrified with vitamin A and D, the calcium just evaporated. See, this is the beauty of the standards being fixed by FSSAI. And that is what we say, okay, go in for mandatory fortification, but half-hearted effects, this will always lead to problems like this. When we initiated work of fortification of milk, we knew that calcium and iron, when we add in milk, it leads to flavor problems, color problems, and heat stability issues. There will always be sedimentation of milk because it affects the protein balance and stability. For the vitamins, it was mainly the poor solubility of this vitamin and also the biological activity lost due to heating. Now, the two main vitamin premixes which are available in the market, mainly in India, we are using the oil-based premixes. The problem with oil-based premix is it is difficult to incorporate in low-fat fruits because it needs homogenization. And also it adheres to the wall of the container. Generally, we are packing milk in LDPE packs. So this is a very good medium for sticking of these vitamins. Or we have these water-miscible premix. See, we are not using the term water-soluble. We are saying water-miscible premix. In this, the fat-soluble vitamins are coated with certain encapsulating agents. Most of the time it is maltodextrin. And these encapsules which are formed, these are less stable because when you give thermal treatment to milk, it hydrolyzes this membrane material. It cracks up. So it leaves the vitamin susceptible to degradation. And of course, it is costly because the encapsulation steps, it adds to the cost. So we worked on the iron and calcium salts of fortification. These are the different salts for the iron and calcium. We found gluconate and the ferric pyrophosphate soluble. This was much more easy to use and gave a stable product. And among the calcium, the phosphate and citrate, we could even use it milk and sell this technology also. So this is we tried for the in vitro digestibility of this iron. And we added along with the iron, along with the vitamin A. Clearly, it enhanced the bioaccessibility. So it was evident they both had iron and vitamin A. They have a symbiotic relationship. Similarly, we did it for calcium and vitamin A. When calcium and vitamin A were given together, they helped in the bioaccessibility. Calcium helped in vitamin D, and vitamin D also helped in the absorption of calcium. So it was a lovely experience to work for this. Then we said, okay, let us try to make some new complexes. So we took proteins from milk and we added by different reactions, the iron and the zinc to it, and we could make complexes. And these protein mineral complexes, what we could make, these were very stable to changes in pH. It was very stable to the thermal treatments which were given, and also due to the stable to ionic concentrations. So these are the different complexes we could prepare: the whey protein concentrate iron, the sodium casein reducing group of lactose, it reacted, it's an ionic reaction with the iron, which is a cation, and it gives a very stable one. So the beauty of this, that it could serve as an organic fortificant with better solubility, bioavailability, and oxidative stability. So this type of ingredients could also work here. Then we said, why not try the same experience with the proteins, and we make complexes with the proteins with vitamins, with sodium caseinate, milk protein concentrates, whey protein concentrates, or we even modified these proteins. So this is the confocal microscopy to show that this red is the protein matrix and this green is your vitamin A and D. Right? So we could see this holds very tenaciously and it is distributed throughout the body of the proteins. So the binding is quite strong here. Now just go to the effect of this different treatments to this vitamin A and D stability. If you just look out for this pasteurization treatments, this is your free vitamin A when we used as an oily form, this red form. We added this into milk and we checked out its stability of vitamin A. We found that after pasteurization, 90% of the vitamin A was stable. But when you used in complex form, stability was 95%. So 90% is stable when you use it in oily form. But if you go for boiling, it's about 70% is still remaining. About 30% has hydrolyzed. You go for sterilization, about 60 to 65% is remaining. The other is lost for this oily form of vitamin A. Similarly, the cases with vitamin D, similar experiences we obtained for this vitamin also. Now because these are sensitive to light, these vitamins, if you see, this is your free oily form. The oily form when we use, if it is exposed to this much amount of 1485 lux, and after 12 hours of exposure to light, we find that only 80% of the vitamin A remained. However, these complexes were much more stable. Similar with the case of vitamin D, where this is your blue one is your free vitamin D. It's about more than 81, 82% still remained after the exposure to light. If we increase the intensity of the light, we found the damage to these vitamins much more. And one more interesting phenomena we faced when we stored this milk in LDP pouches and the glass bottles. Clearly, if it is this is your free vitamin A in fortified milk, and this is which was stored in LDP pouches, and this when we stored in glass bottles, it's about 80% of the vitamin A could be recovered. But when you store it in glass bottles, about 90% of the vitamin could be recovered, right? As you go in for, say, for the 5th day, this was for the 3rd day storage, 5th day and 7th day, the amount of recovery of this vitamins will keep on decreasing when you store for LDP pouches. The glass serves as much better storage medium for this type of fortified milk. We didn't try for Tetra Pak packaging and all because we didn't have the facilities for this. So again, for glass bottles serves us because this is more inert. LDP pouches, if you know, it contains pores and all. So these vitamins can be sorbed up in this pore. Sorption means it's a combination of adsorption and absorption. So the loss for these vitamins is more in LDP pouches as compared to that in glass bottles. We went for in vitro bioaccessibility. When we added free vitamin A in this milk and all, it was about 56%. Whereas in complexes, it was more than 70%. Similarly, for the vitamin D, the oily form resulted in bioaccessibility of 56%, whereas when you use complexes, it was more than 70%. So the milk proteins have a very beneficial role which aids in the enhancement of in vitro bioaccessibility of these vitamins. So what we did, we prepared spray-dried complexes for these proteins with vitamin A and D. And the response was measured according to the solubility and the moisture content of these powders. And it served well. We could go in for this type of complexes. So we could get a technology for these protein complexes, which had greater bioaccessibility. But in no way, the oily complexes also works out well. This can serve as a better way to add to it. But otherwise, the oily ones are also good. No problem with that also. So just to end this lecture, I just like to say that on this World Milk Day, let us switch to fortified milk, which will be beneficial for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Arora, for this informative presentation. We now move on to a presentation by Ms. Deepti Gulati, who is the Head of Programs at GAIN, to speak about the opportunities and challenges in scaling up milk fortification. Ms. Gulati has a rich experience of over 43 years in scaling up food fortification in India. She's currently leading GAIN India's nutrition and fortification agenda through effective policy advocacy and augmentation of food industry's capacity to reach over 891 million people with various fortified staples. She's a recipient of several accolades, including the Outstanding Ambassador of Nutrition and Food Fortification Award by ASSOCHAM, Lifetime Achievement Award, and the Nutrition Leadership Award by IIHMR University, Rajasthan. Madam, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm very happy to be at this webinar and to share the opportunities and challenges that we have faced in scaling up milk fortification. I just wanted to check if you're able to see my screen.
Not as yet, madam.
Okay. Can we stop sharing, Dr. Arora's?
There is nothing shared right now on the screen. So you should be able to do your screen share.
Can you see it now?
Yes, yes, we can.
Okay, thank you so much. So my session is on opportunities and challenges in scaling up milk fortification and share with you what we've been doing. We all know, and we've been hearing, that good nutrition is very important because it defines our health and is central to our growth and development. When we look at what GAIN has been doing, GAIN has been in fortification for the last 15 years. And we have reached 934.5 million people with different types of fortified foods, which include wheat flour, oil, and milk. And from milk, we are reaching 21.7 million people. So it has been a very good experience, and that's what I would like to share with you. As you can see, we are reaching out appropriately fortified milk to 21.7 million people. As Dr. Amrish Mittal said, that yes, fortification has shown a very good impact in children, quoting Dr. Khargawat's study. On my screen, you can also see the Comprehensive National Nutrition Survey data. And I would very proudly like to share with you that GAIN had been working in Rajasthan since 2012 on milk fortification and oil fortification. In early 2016, it became mandatory in Rajasthan to fortify all the oil. And when the Comprehensive National Nutrition Survey was done and the report released, we were very pleasantly surprised to see that vitamin A deficiency in Rajasthan in children was so low compared to the All India level, as you can see on the screen. At All India level, it was between 21.5 to 15.6 in the two age groups, whereas in Rajasthan, it was just 1 to 1.5% in the same age group. So we can very proudly and very comfortably say that perhaps fortification that was done for all the milk, packed milk that is sold in Rajasthan, and for the oil that is sold in Rajasthan, perhaps it made a difference. It is only because no other factor is different than fortification. When we talk of what could have been the success, it was a well-designed program with a clear focus on interventions that work. There was strong engagement, coordination, and collaboration between all the stakeholders. There was stable funding by the government, industry, and other development sector partners. There was a strong government leadership and championship at the highest level, including that from our Honorable Prime Minister, who said that value addition and fortification are the key for growth and development and healthy India. Effective capacity building of food industry to adopt and scale up fortification was something that we focused on. We established a strong monitoring system for quality and quantity. But we also need to do an assessment of coverage and regulatory compliance by the industry. That needs to be strengthened. Rigorous assessment of efficacy and effectiveness needs to be done, because that determines whether your intervention has been successful or not. And so when we look at that all these factors were there, then what were the opportunities and what were the challenges? So first, let's understand what we mean by an opportunity and what we mean by a challenge, and how we use each and every opportunity and we used our skills to overcome the challenges. Opportunity, as per Cambridge Dictionary, says it's a chance to do something that you would like to do, and in a situation or a time which is possible. Then Webster also says it's a good chance or a situation for advancement or progress. When we talk of challenges, it says something that by its nature or character serves to call to battle, contest, or put in special skills and efforts. And hence, when we look at, do we have opportunities to do fortification, or do we have opportunities to do milk fortification? Yes. There is a constitutional provision which, under the Article 47, which says it is important and it is the responsibility of the state, that is the government, to improve the health and nutritional status. There is a political commitment at the highest level where our Honorable Prime Minister endorses fortification. Food fortification is an accepted strategy in the National Nutrition Mission, Poshan Abhiyan. Fortified staples are recommended as mandatory in social food safety net programs like ICDS, MDM, and PDS. Endorsement of cost effectiveness by UN agencies and global development sectors is also there. Then we have India's salt iodization story that has shown the way that if there is mandatory fortification, it impacts the health of people positively. WHO showcases positive consequences. High benefit to cost ratio is definitely a hallmark of fortification, because all the costs put together, fortification is just 1 to 2% of the total MRP, which is less than the normal price variation. FSSAI has set the standards already for milk fortification. Then FSSAI has also provisioned a logo +F, which would help people to identify that this is a value-added, nutritionally better product, because it has +F logo, which says it is fortified. So based on these opportunities that are there, we thought that it is best to start fortification, because we do have a very high burden of micronutrient malnutrition, specifically vitamin A and D. Dr. Mittal has already shown the slides and I'm not going to repeat it. So we must address it by fortifying commodities that people consume normally, which are oil and milk. Here we are talking about milk. Now, when we talk of the challenges that we faced to scale up milk fortification, the first challenge was that even though the cost is very low, the cost of fortifying milk is just about 2 paisa per liter, but it was still considered a financial burden by the industry, because they said, ma'am, you say it is 2 paisa per kg, but we are producing something like 10,000 liters a day. So it costs us money. So we help them to make their processes more efficient so that this cost could be absorbed and not passed on to the consumer. So this was one challenge that we faced and we overcome. Reaching the target populations may be difficult, as dairy sector is very fragmented, and processed milk and fortified milk may be available only in the urban or the peri-urban areas and not necessarily in the village areas. To this, Dr. Amrish Mittal has already responded that those who are in the urban areas are more indoors than those who are outdoors, and sun does play a role in improving the vitamin D status. And yes, this is one challenge. We are also working with small dairies which are producing as much as 5,000 liters a day also. We are helping them to start fortification, because fortification of milk is a very simple process. Ensuring quality assured premixes to all the milk processing dairy plants was again a big challenge. So we engaged with the premix suppliers, ensured that their quality was assured, and we linked the dairy industry to the premix suppliers listed on the FSSAI website, and we engage with all the premix suppliers to ensure that the quality is not compromised. Monitoring the intake of fortified milk and its association with improved nutrition at the population level is not easy. It is not easy to ensure, and it is not very easy to corroborate. But as I showed you in one of my previous slides, when we started fortification of milk and oil with vitamin A and D across Rajasthan, we saw a substantial difference or reduction in vitamin A deficiency. So perhaps fortification did play a role. Social marketing is not rigorous enough to create mass awareness about the benefits of fortified milk, leading to competitive business environment. Business people say, लोगों को तो चाहिए नहीं, लोग तो मांगते ही नहीं, हम क्यों डालें? So I'm sure my next speaker, Mr. Vivek Arora, would be talking in great detail about how social marketing is undertaken to create awareness. And of course, FSSAI has done a lot of work in creating social awareness campaigns which talk about importance of fortification. And because business environment is very competitive and there is a demand and supply situation, we need to be very focused on social marketing. Milk fortification is not yet mandatory, and once it is made mandatory, I'm sure every industry would start fortifying their milk, and we would have better compliance, and we would have much better impact on the health of people, both for vitamin A as well as vitamin D status. What needs to be done is we strengthen dairy sector's capacity to undertake fortification and its quality assurance, set in proper processes for procurement of vitamin premixes, build the capacity nationally and within states for regulatory monitoring, and we strengthen this. Nationwide social marketing campaigns about the advantages of milk fortification, mandatory fortification of milk, and this is what we would request you, sir, CEO sir, to please announce ASAP so that everyone can benefit from it. Milk fortification would be an easy win as it has a significant potential for becoming industry-led and government-supported food fortification initiative across India. Now I would like to also share how GAIN supports. We provide extensive training on appropriate fortification methods and processes, enhanced internal quality assurance and quality control among the participating milk dairies, support procurement of quality assured premixes for fortification, develop protocols for appropriate handling and storage, link the dairies to enable accredited labs for quality assurance and regulatory activities, provide spot testing kits for qualitative testing for the added vitamin A, and support systems for documentation and regular reporting. This we are doing very rigorously. So friends, investing in milk fortification is good ethics as well as good economics. So let's join hands to provide good and improved quality of life to all, good health, good quality of life. Let's drink right. Let's drink milk that is fortified. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, madam. Up next, we have Mr. Vivek Arora to discuss on the importance of creating consumer awareness in scaling up milk fortification. Mr. Arora has more than 2 decades of experience in food and nutrition, especially food fortification, therapeutic and supplementary foods in India, South Africa, Kenya, and Bangladesh. He's currently the senior advisor at Tata Trust, leading one of the largest food fortification initiatives in the world through a public-private partnership between the Tata Trusts and the Government of India. Over to you.
Thank you, Bhuvna, and good afternoon all and esteemed panelists. Basically, the importance of consumer awareness also touches upon the last question raised by Shri Singhal about the mandatory fortification, and is it ethical? And it will help, improve the consumer awareness and take an informed decision, so that that dilemma is a little bit dealt with on, whether they are informed, whether they are taking, whether they are given the vitamins unknowingly or knowingly. The consumer awareness definitely would help, take consumers an informed decision. So I'll start with my slide saying, why do we need it? So there is a lot of negative marketing around, something is added in the milk, or if, whatever is coming out of the animal, cow or buffalo, is the pure milk. Now that is one of the reasons why only 20 to 25% of the milk is processed, because the rest in cities also today is getting consumed directly from the milkman to the household, and it does not go for processing, which not only is a deterrent for not fortifying, but is also a food safety hazard. The second thing which is important is, how do you view it? So there is a perception that, there is something artificial, and that perception, needs to be changed, and all natural, all good is not always right. So, that perception needs to be changed, and that is why you need this consumer awareness. And to identify your products conveniently, you need a logo, for example, the fortified logo, so that, this needs to be communicated to the people so that the choice can be made easily. Now, I'll give you an example from one of the consumer researches that I was involved in. And in Mohali, a consumer goes and, tries to buy a packet of milk. And she is going out to take that fortified milk, wherein the point of sale shopkeeper says, "Ye aapke liye nahi hai, ye patla hai." So somewhere, the healthy milk is also associated with low fat milk. And the people who are consuming, say, full cream milk or standardized milk, the point of sale person, if he's not aware that that can also be fortified and a fortified variant is available, that can be a deterrent. So we need to make the point of sale people, the retail people who are there interacting with the consumers, aware that, fortified milk is available now in all forms. With the new draft coming in for standardized and full cream milk also getting fortified, now all variants can be fortified. So going forward, we will need a communication in this area. Also, there is a misconcept of marketing. Earlier, only the milk that was healthy, in that case, the skim milk and all, they were fortified. And that was for the marketing strategy. So the people also have it in mind that this is a marketing gimmick and does not give us real value. So the communication needs to be done. The awareness needs to be done also to, counter this, saying that, there is real value addition into the milk by fortifying milk. Next slide, please. So if you look at what...
Sorry, if I could just interrupt 1 second. Can Baljot present it on presentation mode? I'm getting requests that they're not able to see the slide very clearly. Thanks.
So I'll continue with the status. So basically what is happening today, as we know, only 20-25% of the milk goes for processing. Now, if you look at the market milk. Market milk means milk which is sold in its liquid form. So there is about 416 lakh liters of milk that can be fortified. This is skim milk, tone, double tone, and standardized. This does not contain the full cream and the cow milk. If we include full cream and cow milk, this will go up to about 650 lakh liters of milk. Now, out of this 416, today 176 lakh liters, which is about 42%, is fortified. Now, with this availability, Valjot, you are able to do the presentation mode? I think she's getting some challenge. So
that's okay.
I'm trying. It's on slideshow mode only. I don't know why people are unable to see.
That's fine. That's fine. Please go ahead. Sorry.
Okay. So out of this 176 lakh liters of milk which is fortified today, most of it is in the cooperative sector. Barring a couple of cooperatives, the rest across all over India, the cooperatives have fortified their milk. But an equal amount of milk is there in the private sector, which is more scattered and it is more challenging. So by doing consumer awareness, we would want to create a demand for the fortified milk, which will nudge these private players, the small players, to start adopting milk fortification. So this is also an opportunity, basically, which we can cash in on. So basically, we need a deeper understanding of the consumer perception and attitude to fortification. Only then, we can, reduce the barriers which are there for purchase of fortified food. So we need a consumer research in this direction to reduce these barriers. Next slide, please. Now, if you look at what kind of target audience, so if you look at all the staples, then milk, oil, and salt are the three staples which are more market driven. So this is where, the primary target consumer is the housewife or the adolescent or the children. So contrary to wheat and rice, which is, which is more fortified through the government safety net programs, where the primary consumer is the government safety net, because that is the difference between milk, oil against the wheat and rice. So the target audience is different, and this target audience is basically this urban, semi-urban kind of consumer, which is middle class, who may not be aware about their nutrition requirements, who are not that much knowledgeable. So that is why we need this consumer awareness campaign around milk fortification, so that they can take an informed decision. Next slide, please. How can we go about it? So what is the strategy? We need to build a campaign which will provide, a central idea based on consumer insight. So whatever consumer research comes out with, we can prepare a campaign around this, which will, which will provide the emotional benefits of consuming fortified milk with vitamin A and D. So we need to bring in this emotion into this consumer awareness campaign, and that resonates well with the larger audience, and this will help them what? This will help them build recall, so they can, recall the brand or recall the logo to take an informed choice, create relevance for their target group, encourage preference, and drive action for purchase of fortified milk. Next slide, please. How can this be executed? So basically, we need a central campaign, which is a national level campaign. This campaign needs to be brand agnostic. It needs to come from a credible source like FFRC, FSSAI, or NDDB, which has no commercial interest. We can use social media to a great extent to drive awareness nationally. We can tie up with media houses in the key markets. And also this can be mixed with the ammunition at the regional level, where the dairies which are there at regional level can participate in this communication campaign. Next slide, please. So the execution of the campaign basically is as a national asset. We can use radio, TV, cinema, or we can use website and social media to create this awareness. We can also go ahead with public relations. We can go ahead with articles in the newspapers and magazines at national level to create this consumer awareness. And at regional level, we can tie up with dairies to do outdoor creatives or signages or shutters and wall paints and balloons, etc. Whatever marketing activities we can do. So it has to be a two-pronged approach, a two-pronged consumer awareness approach, wherein it is established as a campaign at national level, and then it is disseminated at the regional level with the help of the dairies and local partners. Thank you so much. This is all that I have to submit. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vivek. Thank you. Today, we also have our premix partners participating in the milk fortification deliberation. We have Megha Mandke, who is the lead for technical marketing with Hexagon Nutrition. Megha is a registered dietitian and a certified diabetes educator. She has worked as a nutritionist with reputed medical and public health institutions and handled projects across adolescent nutrition, hygiene and sanitation, communicable and non-communicable diseases, among others. Over to you, Megha.
Thank you, Bhuvneshwari. So I'll just present my screen. Hope it is visible.
Yes, it is.
Thank you. So good afternoon to all the dignitaries and all the delegates present today. I would first like to thank GAIN and FSSAI for inviting us for this very webinar, addressing on a very crucial topic, that is challenges of supply chain and the quality of micronutrient premixes. Secondly, I would like to thank the entire team of NIPTIM and especially VC Sir, Dr. Komal, for today's inauguration of milk fortification. And the entire team of Hexagon Nutrition is really excited and grateful for the collaboration with NIPTIM and GAIN to set up the Center of Excellence for Food Fortification. Thank you. Well, without a delay, I would start my presentation. So before I start with my presentation, I'll just give you a quick brief as to what Hexagon Nutrition is, because that will mark the quality of premix that we manufacture. So we have 30 years of legacy and trust. We were founded in 1991. Hexagon Nutrition is a nutraceutical company with a very strong focus on research and development. We cater to industries globally, and our flagship products are sold across the world in 70 plus countries. Our product development team and research and development team work very closely with the client from ideation product to the launch of the product. We also do analytical testing, and we also do stability testing to see if the product has the nutrient it claims. Okay, so we operate in three verticals. One is micronutrient formulation premixes, B2B vertical, clinical nutrition, which is B2C vertical, and therapeutic food, which is B2B vertical. These are our beautiful.
Megha,
yes.
Megha, may I please interrupt? Instead of this, can you please focus on the topic, because
yes.
we are running against time.
Yes,
Thank you.
So manufacturing facilities are in Chennai, Tuticorin, and Nasik, and R&D in Nasik. Yes, so I'm coming to the topic that about the certifications and accreditations, because this is what marks the quality of the premix. So we are FSSAI and FSSC 22000 certified, because we maintain the food quality levels and ensure safety, providing satisfaction to every customer. We are GMP certified, that ensures the finished product are effective and safe for market distribution. We are ISO IEC certified to ensure that the equipments are well calibrated, and the testing that we do is according to the standard protocols and procedures. And we are also halal and kosher certified, which again we follow the Islamic and the Jewish dietary laws and regulations. So coming to the quality assurance of the micronutrient formulation, there are three grades of nutrient. One is feed grade, pharma grade, and food grade. So the nutrients used for food fortification are completely food grade quality. Quality is assured by physiochemical testing in an in-house laboratory, which is NAPL accredited again. And the quality of premix is ensured from the receipt of the raw material till the manufacturing of the premixes according to the certifications that I've already discussed earlier. Quantitative estimation is done by high performance liquid chromatography, and qualitative estimation of vitamin A is done by antimony trichloride test. Now this gives a very nice blue color in the test. We do keep due records, and we ensure that the audits are done time to time. When we talk about quality control, these are the steps that we follow. So we analyze the raw material and the packaging material by sophisticated techniques. Then we evaluate the material, and if it's dissatisfactory, we reject it. Then it comes to micronutrient formulation. This micronutrient formulation is done as per the client's requirement or as per the standards of FSSAI, and we also add overages to maintain the process loss. Then micronutrient formulation is done under controlled temperature and relative humidity, which I'll touch upon in my next slides. And once the approval is given, we analyze this, and once the results are fine within the range, then is the time when we follow all these 6 steps. Then is the time when we deliver the product to the customer. FSSAI standards for milk fortification already laid out. I want to focus on 2 things over here. One is that we fortify it with A and D, that is added to the milk in dry powder form and water miscible form. Because more than one nutrient added, that is, so it's better to use a premix rather than going for an individual nutrient, because it is easily homogenized. When you talk about individual nutrient, there's mishandling, and these micronutrients are very sensitive to environment, so you won't get the desired results after testing. So moving on to the handling and storage of milk premix. Micronutrient premix are stored at 25 degrees centigrade, 55% of relative humidity. It's stored in a cool, dry and hygienic place away from sunlight. Dispensing of the premix to the production should be monitored very carefully, and for which we will suggest you to keep a logbook from inventory of the premix to the addition of the premix, because this will ensure that that there is no overdosing of the premix. So what you can do is you can log the manufacturing manufacturing date, batch number, who handled that premix, what was the issue. So these things can be logged. On receipt of every premix consignment, check the availability of certificate of analysis, because this will give you the label claim of the premix. So what all micronutrients are added in the premix. So I will just quickly touch upon 2-3 points, because already these points have been discussed in earlier speakers. Milk is an excellent vehicle, as you know, because it's consumed on a very large scale by all age groups. So A and D is a good, it's a fat soluble vitamin, and therefore milk is a very good carrier for this. It also aids calcium absorption. Vitamin D also aids calcium absorption. It's cost effective, as Deepti ma'am very rightly said. It's just 2 paisa per liter. The dosage that we add is 25 to, it contributes only 25 to 30% of the RDA. But as CEO sir said that it is very important to, think about the EAR, RDA and tolerable upper limit. But tolerable upper limit is way high, but what we are adding is very less. So deficiency is more bothersome, I think. Also, dairies do not require any additional equipment, no investment, no cost to be incurred in this particular. So coming up to supply chain challenges, so they say smooth seas do not make skillful sailors. So we also had few challenges on our path. So majorly when you talk about challenges, I'll talk about the lockdown challenges that we had. So during the input raw material and also dispatch of FG, there were 2 challenges that were majorly faced. One was transportation logistic challenge, and the other was the vitamin cost also went up. So there was huge demand, shortage of supply, so the cost went up. So vitamin costs were really very volatile that time. We also couldn't, airlift the material or ship the material to the customer, because the price of the logistics were higher than the price of the premix. So it was very difficult during that time. Also, the cost of the currency, it was high inflation rate. So all these contributed to the challenges of the supply chain. So these are few of the clients that we have. from cooperative and milk dairy, so I'll not touch upon each one of them. So I hope I'm within the time limits, ma'am. So just to sum up this, we are a complete nutrition provider because we fortify food, and you can see the picture, so it's self-explanatory. I need not explain. I'm sorry if I've exceeded the time, ma'am.
Not at all. Thank you, Megha.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I just wanted to take a second here to inform that most of the QA have been responded, and we believe the rest of the questions that have been coming up will be posted on the website along with with the presentations and the recording of today's deliberations. Moving forward, we are delighted to have with us Dr. Chindi Vasudevappa, the Honorable Vice Chancellor of the National Institute of Food Technology and Entrepreneurship and Management, NIFTM. He's a recipient of the Young Scientist Award in 1987 by the Fisheries Society and the Best Extension Worker Award of 1987 by the University of Agriculture Science, Dharwad. With a vast experience in aquaculture technology and agricultural research and development, he's published over 74 research papers and 32 books, manuals and chapters in the areas of fishery, biology, freshwater aquaculture, cage culture, fish processing and transportation, etc. He has served as a member of several professional bodies and chairman of national committees. We at GAIN are honored to be collaborating with NIFTM, and we welcome Dr. Vasudevappa to deliver his talk on building capacity and partnerships for scaling up milk fortification. Sir, over to you. Sir, you are on mute.
Yes, really. Okay, I hope I'm audible.
Yes, sir, you are.
So thank you, and I would say again, good afternoon to every one of you, especially Arun Singhal sir, who is there with us today, and Vivek Arora. Of course, we had other dignitaries who have left probably, and especially all the members of GAIN, Hexagon, and FSSA, of course. So welcome all of you on behalf of NIFTM for this very important webinar. And now I think, I'm the last speaker likely. So always very difficult to be a last speaker because there won't be any points left for you to talk, but at the same time, you have to dig out something which can really impress. So that's what I just have decided to do, but I don't know how far I'll be able to impress the people and the audience. But anyway, I think, India is a country with huge milk production, something like 190 million tons of milk, which mainly comes from the rural households. That apart from the corporates or the organized dairy sector, rural household or cooperative households are something SHGs, they are the main pillars of milk production. That means milk is something which is a food which is coming from all over the country, or from each and every household. Probably you go to any village, the life depends on milk. I don't know, that is the reason probably we have a lot of problems with milk as well. The major problem which we have been encountering is the high level of microbes in milk because of maybe the various transportational issues, maybe the chilling issues, or even the processing, value addition. All these are really creating a big challenge for the milk industry. And in addition to that, of course, we all know over 70% of Indian population, they consume less than the recommended daily amount of micronutrients, which includes maybe all the micronutrients and the vitamins, minerals, everything. So that means it's a great challenge, I would say, further. And women and children are the hard hit. I would say more than 90% of the malnourished people in India are women and children. Especially children below the age of 5, they are more vulnerable even for vitamin D deficiency and the vitamin A deficiency also. This is something, of course, the another group which really requires attention is the growing or aging population. So this is where I think the fortification becomes an essential requirement to meet their day-to-day requirement, because I know they will not be able to work in the fields or maybe run around or roam around and things like that. That means they are tied down to their homes and they need to be kept healthy. I think these are our target, I would say, the people who are supposed to be, to whom we are supposed to be addressing the issues. So that is one thing which I thought, so we should know what is the target for us, first of all. and then how do we build the whole capacity, and what are the real challenges and things like that. Of course, capacity building, I thought it has been very well explained by Vivek Arora-ji. I don't want to touch upon that. But at the same time, capacity building of the students, even I would say this is where I think we need to really take care. There are many the food science colleges, many, and I would say the home science colleges across the whole country. NIFTEM maybe one or two, that's all, but there are many other institutions, ICTs and central institutes, things like that. Probably we need to make it mandatory that building awareness through the students is something which will have a multiplying effect. So that is something which is very, very important. And the rural youth, today's rural youth, in fact, I would say this is where we need to build our capacity and reach these people so that they are the real people who are the producers of milk and who are the suppliers of milk. And of course, industry has been well discussed. I don't want to say much about it. Women and children, this is another area. In fact, I am from a rural background, from a village. The women and children, they lack all sorts of, I would say, the information which are really essential for them. But at the same time now, the awareness has come to the extent of saying that you should drink milk every day. So that is something which is very good. But how do we build their real requirement, the deficiencies? We need to understand. That is something which is a very big, I would say, mandate for each one of us to really look at how best we can do this. Of course, FSSAI is doing a lot of things. I was also involved in Eat Right movement and all that. But this is where I think we need to really get involved seriously. And that apart, of course, the self-help groups. So they are again a major target. We forget them because they are mostly unorganized sector. And there are lakhs of self-help groups across the whole country. This is one thing, probably the social awareness building exercise, what Dr. Vivek said, I think it has to look into all these aspects as well. I would say now, I think as an institution of food, and probably I think I need to look at really the research part of it. I know research, as far as milk is concerned, I think NDRI is an authority. They have done a lot of work. Amit was sharing all his information about the milk. But at the same time, I think it's just not only the milk, could be the oils, could be the flours, could be the wheat and the maida and even the rice flours and things like that. They need to be fortified. That's what we are aiming at in the center which we have just inaugurated today morning, the fortification center, which we are going, Center of Excellence, which we are going to operate on a cooperative mode with GAIN and also Hexagon, and maybe some more partners we can always involve. Of course, FSSAI is always there with us. So that being the scenario, then what is that really the research that is really required? One, of course, is the method of processing itself. Probably this is something which is very, very important. I would say the processing starts right from the udder, the milking. So that's where from there we need to take care of the whole milk quality and things like that. And I wish to just share here that we are partnering with a New Zealand team here, especially for one of the groups who are processing the milk. Their microbial level is maybe about more than, maybe less than 1/10 of what other milks are experiencing. That we have analyzed. And that is one plus point for them, why their keeping quality is about 7 to 8 days. And second thing is, of course, they are bottling it, not putting into the sachets. So that is another very big advantage. Probably that is the reason why we get the best quality milk here. And they concentrate, even the educating the I would say the dairy sector itself, they have taken up in a big way. And that's how I think they are getting a good milk. Of course, that apart, I would say another very important area is the bioassimilability. The bioassimilation is something which is very, very important. How much is added, how much is absorbed, how much is utilized. I think these are things which probably we can always collaborate with NDRI, and we also have an excellent facility here. We'll be very happy to do with them, including the biotechnology part of it, we can always address. So, or a nanotechnology part of it, we can always address. I think probably that is one thing which we need to really take care of. Of course, the bioassay studies, we have all the facility here. We have an animal house facility where it has to be done meticulously, because in India, we don't have that sort of a data which is really required for us to take things forward in the right way. This is one thing which I feel, it's really required. That is the reason we established a animal house where we have all the rabbits, the mice and all that. So we can always try on these things and try to get whatever data, scientific data that is really required. I think that is something which is very useful. And of course, as was said by the earlier speakers, the limits of fortification. India is a country where I think vitamin A and D, we need not even bother about limits unless otherwise it impairs with the taste and the quality of the milk. I think that's what is very important, because all of us are suffering from vitamin D deficiency. So that we need to really take it forward in a very good way. And of course, coming to getting the quality premixes. I think this is something which is very much required if at all we want to really take it forward in a very big way. Quality premix preparation is something which has to be done in a very aseptic conditions and with quality management system in place, and also the assessment system in place. That's where probably I think thanks to FSSA and our NIFTEM lab is recognized as national referral lab. So that is something, we have an excellent lab facility created, and we can always address such of these issues. Of course, another very important thing, of course, Gulati madam was telling that it costs only 2 paisa per liter. 2 paisa may be a older estimation, but now probably it may be maybe 5 paisa or 10 paisa. That all is okay, and it doesn't make a big difference. But only thing, quality assurance is something which I would say it's very, very important. Another important thing which I thought we should be flagging is reaching the people who are deficient in vitamin A or D or the micronutrients. I think this is something, in fact, we did some studies even in Madhya Pradesh and also in Kerala, where we conducted, especially utilizing the millets for the rural, I would say not the rural people, especially the tribal people. And millet incorporation in a qualitative way, definitely it helped their nutrition in a very good way. In fact, the MP government wants us to take some more projects on these things. And even in Kerala also, bakery product fortification. This has really created a big, I would say, especially, an impact, especially for addressing the requirements of the carrying woman. So, or immediately after the delivery. So these are all things which can be given as a sort of a small, packets, and we need to really fix up what is that really to be done there. I think that is very important. And another very important thing I would say is tracking. Yeah, an established tracking system, maybe utilize the artificial intelligence or IoT of things and all that. Probably that is something which again need to be brought in here, because we have been talking about the IoT for every small thing. So that is something which has to come in place as far as when we are addressing the rural folk and things like that. Of course, scaling up the operations and all that is all there, and we need to do it. Once we achieve these things, probably scaling up of the operations for fortification to the maximum extent, I think that should not be really difficult. So, of course, another very important thing probably is the government policy. Shingal sir, maybe, he may laugh at it, but I know government policy is very, very important, especially to popularize such of these minor, I would say, changes which we bring in a food. Like at morning also, I was sharing that thing earlier. When COVID was there, people were reluctant to go and get vaccinated. Today, you can't control people there who come for vaccination. So that means that sort of an awareness building has to happen, and only then it is possible only through government policy. I know government is always supportive for the fortification and things like that, but how do we take it forward? How do we make it into an operational guideline? I think that is something which has to be really seriously seen. And that apart, of course, I know the quality management system has to be there in place. And I think one thing which we need to really understand is probably developing some of the probes. I think is something which is very, very important, which can give instantaneous results. What is the level and what is the level after the treatment and things like that. And of course, selecting institutions like maybe NIFTEM or residential colleges, it would definitely give us a lot of support in terms of evaluation, it becomes very easy. Probably, I think that is something which we can do even in the beginning itself. And I'll be very happy to, in fact, utilize all our facilities here to take care of our students as well, and also assess what is the level of incorporation that has really helped the whole thing. And also not only this, even today we are talking about the immune response and the immunity enhancement system. So how do we bring in this issue into the milk? I think maybe vitamin fortification and all that. But is there any other thing? I would say more of the pharma, not pharma exactly, the natural immune boosters, something like that, which can also be fortified and things like that. Probably that is another big area, which may be really essentially required for a country like India. And with this, probably I think I try to bring in some new concepts into the whole fortification system. I know otherwise the points which I made, a PPT also I made, where everything was covered almost by everybody. I thought I should not use that PPT. I thought that I'll just make few points as a panelist. Thank you very much. Thank you, all the best.
Thank you very much, sir. It was indeed insightful and very helpful for us. We have today was a very special day for our collaboration with NIFTIM, the launch of fortified milk at NIFTIM. And we've made a small video. I know we have already overshot time, but bear with us for a couple of minutes as we show a brief video of today's launch. Baljot, over to you.
Thanks, Bhuvneshwari. Please give me a minute. Meanwhile, I launch that video.
Sure.
Are we getting the sound?
No, we're not. No.
Okay, so this video is from today morning's event that we did with NIFTIM to inaugurate Center of Excellence for Milk Fortification, and we launched fortified milk. This video had a sound, but I'm sorry, unfortunately, I cannot right now technically understand why it's not playing. So please bear with this.
I think Baljot, we've got
Apologies, technology always.
That's all right. A technical glitch has to happen in every webinar. That's fine. Thank you so much, Baljot. That brings us to the end of our technical sessions, and I'm sure the audience and everybody attending this have found the discussions to be informative and engaging, as it was for me. I'm delighted to welcome Ms. Enoshi Sharma, the Director of FSSAI, to share a few words with us and provide the concluding remarks. Madam is currently serving as Director FSSAI for Behavioral Change and Communication, Eat Right India initiative, and extending support to scaling up fortification across the country. She has also served as Director, National Health Mission in Haryana. Madam, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, and wishing everybody on the occasion of the Milk Day, and we just hope that it goes on with the process of fortification in the country. Today's discussion has been capturing key insights on the benefits and positive health outcomes of fortifying milk with vitamin A and D. Time and again, it has been reiterated how helpful it will be for the health of the citizens of this country. We've heard how there's a sufficient evidence indicating how milk fortification is safe and does not affect the quality and sensory attributes of milk, the impact of fortified milk on health and immunity. So scaling up our milk fortification efforts requires commitment and concerted efforts of all stakeholders. We already have a number of industry partners, premix suppliers, as well as technical think tanks. We've heard from partners such as GAIN, Tata Trust, Hexagon, and NIFTEM. It is encouraging that there is recognition of a common vision to scale up with quality and continue to mitigate bottlenecks with innovative solutions. What we also need is a food systems approach when we understand the importance of fortification. Fortification cannot be seen in isolation as a solution to a larger program of micronutrient deficiency. It is just one way of tackling it, but the recognition that it is needed is something that we need to create awareness of, not only among the scientific community, so that there is some sort of a balanced view that it is not leading to toxicity or overconsumption of micronutrients, as well as creating awareness among the people, general citizens of this country, the importance of consuming fortified products, especially milk, which is so easily available. So I would like to thank all the speakers today for their valuable insights, the participants in this webinar, hoping that they take something back, implement it, and adopt it. So thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you, Madam. We just want to take a minute to inform that there is a feedback link that's been posted on the chat box. We would request everybody to complete this feedback. And there is also questions around certificates. Your certificates will be shared upon submission of the feedback, which will really help us to arrange, similar such better webinars in the future. Thank you. That brings us to the end of this webinar on improving nutrition quality of milk through fortification on the 20th anniversary of the World Milk Day. On behalf of GAIN and the entire team, I express a heartfelt gratitude to all the eminent speakers and panelists who offer their vital time and grace the webinar with their knowledge, insights, and enlightening presentations. I must also express my gratitude to all the attendees and participants for their patience and unwavering attention throughout the session. I'd like to share my admiration for my colleagues at Team FFRC for extending their unflinching support in organizing and hosting today's event. I believe today's webinar has been extremely productive and informative for all of us. Thank you for all your participation and in making this event a success. Have a good day.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Goodbye, everyone.